Hello everyone, welcome back. In this section, we'll talk about how AI agents, different options, how AI agents interact with the APIs. Uh, this recap our previous session, like how developers interact with APIs, then basically discovering an API, discovering the endpoints and input parameters, and what is the response. And then once you know what endpoint needs to call, then we have construct the payload, and then once we get a response, we interpret the response, and then we send the users, right? What really we are doing, right? In development phase itself, based on the requirement, we wanted to find out what API should be using it, right? We do the research there, and we find out the right endpoints. We test it using REST clients. Once you know this is exactly fitting my API I should use, and then you finalize the API, then you are integrating the code and you test it, and then same code is going to production. And as and when user request through, and you get the response. This is deterministic. User input is also requesting through web UI, or maybe somebody is calling an API. That payload is not changing. That is deterministically is calling that API and is getting the response back, right? So that is purely deterministic. Once you develop, everything is done, and there is no loop there. Directly discovery, and just calling the right endpoint there. Now coming back to now the new phase, agents interacting with APIs, right? So yeah, so same discovery and constructing API and interpreting it, right? So these are the straightforward steps, but it is difficult for agents, right? Because user input is not constant. User can write a different prompt, and different prompt, sometimes ambiguous, and finding the right endpoint, and finding the right input parameters, and it has to discover, construct, and send a response, right? So to do that, it should understand the whole contract, API contract, and user entity is matching or not, then only should response back, right? So then only it will pick the right endpoint. That maybe sometimes it's wrong, then it has to do the same loop. Okay, maybe this is not expected, and then call a different endpoint and try. Maybe it will call different tool set and then finally get a response back, right? It's not a one request and then getting a response back, but it has to do some loops in between and finding the right tool and then getting a response back, right? So now we are moving from deterministic approach to and finally dynamically finding an right API, correct API, right? So let's try to understand what agents are good at, what agents are dangerous at, right? So we all know that agents are good at understanding the fuzzy intent, mapping synonyms, ambiguity, structured choice, emptying the JSON that matches a schema, and summarizing a raw response in English, right? So these are not determinate; these are probabilistic systems, right? Right. So what dangerous set? Remembering your API exactly, they hallucinate. We all know that LLMs hallucinate, right? If you hallucinate, it will invent the wrong endpoints, wrong parameters, so that can create a chaos, right? So then there's a deterministic execution and counting state, and then yeah, guaranteeing safety is not dangerous yet, right? Because sometimes it will call destructive APIs, delete, or maybe creating with the wrong input and wrongly posting some content, right? So prompt injection is possible, but that's the reason we should have a policy in place, what can be done, what cannot be done, right? So then staying accurate with the when menu is huge, right? So if you have a list of lot of tools that is there and calling a right endpoint, right? They are not good at. So if more content, more tools are there, it will it performs it doesn't perform well. Seeing all the agent or LLMs capabilities, right? We have to design our our options. We choose our options, right? Then there should be a policy and prompt injections. We should be taking care of that. Four questions every tool layer should answer, right? The discovery, when how does the model know which what it can do, right? And selection, how does pick the right tool with arguments, right? So we should ask ourselves, like, how does agent will know, how does it pick the right tool and the right arguments? And execution, who runs the call and how do you stop a bad rate? This is prompt injections or maybe calling a wrong endpoint and all. And loop, how does the result come back and drive the next step? See, whatever loop we are doing, we are looping in during development phase. Maybe we see that this API works, doesn't work, and use something else. And now we figure it out during testing or during finding the APIs. But that loop here is happening dynamically, and maybe it has to call two different APIs to get the response back, right? There's a chain of APIs to call, right? So based on the response back, there will be loop will be there, and then the end of that just linked to token cost, right? So how many loops based on the loops and more loops, more tokens is adding to the input tokens. Yeah, we discussed the different options in the initially, I think during overview and function calling and dynamic Python and Open API spec with this micro CLI and MCP and orchestrator. There are different options are there, but from if you these are from more model agency to more structure and determinism. This is again based on my experience with these tools, based on my research, my testing. So, for example, dynamic Python, right? As and when request we get it, based on that we call a write a code and calling an API. And then second is function calling. Function calling is you have a list of tools that is there and calling is directly just like a library which is sitting there and you're calling an API there. Next one is Open API, micro rapids. This is CLI, which is converting Open spec into endpoints, and then it have some intelligent mechanism, how to search, discover, and and finding the right endpoint. It has a more description than Open specs, right? And MCP and function calling is similar, but MCP is more a standard protocol it uses, and industry standard everybody using MCP, and MCP servers understand, right? MCP, but decoupled and portable. And fourth one is orchestrator. If your tool set is big, and if a domain, each tool set is having a different kind of a domain, right? If you want to have a right one leader agent and then you have a sub agents are expert in each agent is expert in some tasks, right? Just like in developers also, right? We have a DB experts, then DB will hand out the task to DBOps, DevOps, right? Accordingly, so it will have more specific to that domain, and it will call the respect to APIs. So from A, B to D, C is MCP is cross-cutting about, no, this is like a function calling with a MCP protocol. Orchestrator, again, if you have more tools, then you should go for it. But we'll demo each and every option we discuss in detail. Question is really five options only there? Honestly, no, because this is based on my experience with, no, I was researching on, on different ways to interact with APIs, right? Function calling and no MCPs, we already know some CLIs and right. So yeah, different ways is there, but yeah, this is another five options. Maybe you can put in your comments that what are other options are there. I'm curious to know those options as well. Uh, Yes, so next one is the open end of the day, like OpenAI spec is the spec we already have it, which is a standard. But at this point of time, I see OpenAI specs are not very clean, right? Some projects are not maintaining well, right? Some specs are very clean and it has there, but maybe that times the description is not sufficient, right? For MCP, we have a different spec, where we convert that into MCP, and MCP have a tool descriptions and all, right? The way it will more context, it will give you, it will agent can LLM can pick a right tool. So yeah, spec should be clean. Then, but yeah, we are giving a phrase book to onto different options, right? But these are not competitors. These are different options you have depends on uh, decision framework, like do you know your OpenAI spec API? Maybe MRapids, the CLI option is better rather than MCP, right? But again, it is depends on the number of tools, endpoints you have it and all that. There is no one answer to this one. When you have more endpoints, more tools, then based on the context, it will intent and then it will finding a right endpoint. When someone should check which option is good for you. Take the tool set and whatever you need it, test it with the different options and choose the right option for you, right? And they can MCP, just like function calling with a two different tool set, and you understand the pros and cons of this. We discuss in detail what is an MCP and then how no whether what are the advantage and disadvantages with this MCP, how token costs or maybe what are security issues with this MCP. We can discuss this in detail. And there is a, if you have more than 25 tools and all, right, so it is a different domains. It's hard to agent to pick the right tool. There will be hallucinate and where you want a determinate system. Maybe it's a, you may not get with this, right? So yeah, orchestrator out and least privileges. Need model to compose transform freely. Uh, yeah, it's a dynamic trusted sandbox, right? Dynamic Python or function calling. This, if you have a sandbox and where you have run the functions and then just writing a Python code and calling an endpoint and then the response back. Even function calling is same, but function calling it knows there are tool set will be there. It will based on the intent. Agent picks the right tool from the tool set. Again, depends on the description. Quality of the description depends. With that, thanks and yeah, we'll see you in next session.